Welcome back to Navitech. Lucas here. So in this episode, I really wanted to show you guys how you can make an old laptop fast again so you can browse it. You're probably not going to be able to use that many intensive applications just because processors back then weren't that fast. And that's not going to change, but you can certainly lighten the load on the processor so it feels a lot faster. So if you're browsing or using Office applications, then you can definitely get your computer up and running again. Let's get into it. So the first thing I recommend doing is installing a lightweight Linux distro. This will just really improve performance, and I definitely recommend that. It's just a great option. Another thing you could do is reinstall Windows. This is another great thing since it will definitely lessen the workload on the CPU and RAM. So that's just another really great idea, and I could definitely recommend that. It will also just make stuff faster, and you can open more applications. So that is another really great option. Another thing you could do is installing Windows updates. That might help if your drivers are out of date, but it probably won't improve performance that much. One of the biggest things, though, that will improve performance is installing ThrottleStop. So this is a great application. So if you do want to install this, just type in ThrottleStop, and Tech Power Up should come up. So there you see it. Just tap on that, and then you should see a little bit of a download thing. So I would definitely recommend downloading the stable version and not the beta, but it really is your choice. So then just choose the server, which one's closest to you, and I would definitely say the download's fast really in each server you choose, so you should be pretty good. So now just go to File Explorer, and then go to your downloads page or wherever you save your downloads, and then just open it, and then all you need to do after you've opened it is extract it. So you'll see that at the top, and that is the application you want to run. So this, just extract it to where you want that application to be. So I personally like it in the downloads, so I just create a folder called ThrottleStop, and that's just the way I like doing it since it's easy and accessible if the application doesn't open at start like we are going to set it to. So just type in the name of the folder you want, and then hit extract. So once it's extracted, just go to the application and click twice on it. Then it's going to need you to sign in as admin, so just hit yes, or enter the password if you need to. Then just hit OK, and there's a lot of different options on ThrottleStop. Since this is a really old processor, it doesn't have voltage control, so that's a little bit of a bummer, but you can still boost performance. So some of the things I first like to do is just check out the panel, see what options I have. So you should also check this out. If you do have voltage control, I recommend putting ICC max at the maximum. So here I'm unlocking the power limit, and that's just a really great way to boost performance. It's not going to give you that much just because you don't have control of the ICC max, but you should be okay. And then I also like setting turbo time to max. That will just really help performance. And then PPO time is good to set to max too. Then also just make sure to hit clamp on both of them. So just apply it, and everything should be looking pretty much like this. So that will definitely help you boost performance. So I definitely recommend doing this. So just hit apply, and then also another thing that is worth it is putting clamp on, so I definitely recommend that. And then just make sure you did everything right. And also you can put clamp on PPO power limit, but it's not going to give you that much performance gains. So now in here, there's just a couple settings that are really preference settings. They're not going to give you more performance or anything. So just set them as you would like if you want ThrottleStop to be minimized or not. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is open task schedule, so you can set ThrottleStop to open on login. So I'll show you how to do this, and this will definitely help the application so you don't have to open it every time, so you get the performance gains every time you log in. So just go to create a basic task, and that's just a way to start a task easily. Definitely recommend that. So just click on that. Just give it a sec to load. It usually takes a little bit of a sec, especially on older computers. Then just type in ThrottleStop, or whatever you want to name it. Just make sure you can remember the name, so if you ever need to disable it or anything, then you can do that. So then click on when I log on, then hit start a program, and this will just allow you to select ThrottleStop. So now go to wherever you set ThrottleStop. I set mine in documents and then the ThrottleStop folder. So just go there, click on it twice or hit open, and then just hit next. And then you don't need to put a description in it. It doesn't really matter. If you want to, then you can, but just make sure to open properties after. So now when you're in here, there's actually a lot of stuff you're gonna set. So make sure to do only when the user is logged on so that it doesn't act weird. And then make sure to configure it for Windows 10. That's also really important. So there's a lot of other stuff, so then you can just check through here, see what settings you want to set. I would uncheck every box and conditions just so that there's no conditions and it always runs. Then in here, there's a couple other stuff you're going to want to stop, especially stop the task if it runs longer than 3 days. Just make sure to uncheck that and all that type of stuff. It just really doesn't matter, and you don't want the application closing. So unless if you do want to only run ThrottleStop for 3 days, it doesn't really matter. Then just check your settings, make sure you made sure to check run only when the user is logged on, and also configure for Windows 10. So another application that will really help boost performance, it's called Razer Cortex, and it really frees up a lot of RAM and CPU, so I definitely recommend it. So just open your browser, it doesn't really matter which one you have, just type in Razer Cortex, and then make sure to download it from Razer's website so there's no malware or anything. Just hit download now. It's actually pretty simple, and it should download pretty fast. You can also look at some of the features it has if you want to explore a little bit of that, but the main reason we're downloading this is just to gain some RAM and also some CPU performance. So when the download is complete, you can either click on it there if it does show that on your browser. It doesn't really matter, but you might want to close your browser when you are installing. So just close your browser, head over to File Explorer, and then go to wherever it saves your downloads from your browser. So for me, it's just the downloads page, and that is the default, so it's probably that way on your computer too. Then just close File Explorer and give it a sec to load. It usually will take a little bit of time for the installer to load just because you are using this on an older computer or a slower computer. So just make sure to give it a sec, and then once it is loaded up, it should give you a couple options. So there you go, and I would not just have Razer Cortex checked because that's if you have any other Razer products or mouses or keyboards. I would just have Razer Cortex checked. So you most likely will not need the other one. So just check that and then go over and hit install. It might take a sec to download, mattering on your internet speed, and it's also probably going to take a sec to install. So this should really boost performance and really free up a lot of RAM. So this should be actually a pretty good application, just because when you are browsing the web and opening a lot of tabs, it does use up a lot of RAM, especially if you only have 4 gigabytes or less. So this will really help this. It won't make the OS quite as light as something like a lightweight Linux distro, but it still will be pretty light and will definitely help it boost performance RAM-wise and also CPU-wise, so I definitely do recommend this. So once the installation is done, just make sure to have Launch Razer Cortex checked. Just hit Get Started, and then it should just take a couple seconds to load, but you will see the Razer logo appear. So once that does appear, then just give it another couple seconds, and the application should open. So personally, I prefer continuing as a guest, just because I don't want to really have to log in, but you can log in if you want to. So if you do gaming, then you can get rewards for stuff like that. So then just give it another sec to load. It's going to probably ask you again, then you're not going to need to optimize any game settings. Then just go over here, and then go to Processes, and I like to check everything besides ThrottleStop, just because that will free up a lot more RAM, actually, than it shows there. So you can free up to like a gigabyte of RAM here, so that is pretty awesome to see. So just look out for ThrottleStop and make sure not to check that, just because we don't want throttle stop being turned off while you are using your desktop, since that does help boost performance. So you can uncheck pretty much any application you want. If you are using your phone, then I would not recommend checking that, obviously. But pretty much all the other stuff don't need to be unchecked or be used. So you can look at it, but I would recommend checking as many stuff as you can, just because it will definitely help boost RAM and performance overall. So the first thing that you need to do if you do want to repaste the CPU, and I actually do really recommend repasting the CPU on pretty much any laptop, just because the old thermal paste isn't as good, and also it's just after a lot of time the heat will eventually destroy the thermal paste and make it really hard to dissipate heat. So I would definitely recommend repasting the CPU and GPU if you do have a discrete GPU. So you should be able to see all the components. There might be a little bit of a metal bracket over where your CPU and GPU are. On my one there is, so there's going to be a lot of screws that you're going to need to unscrew pretty much on any laptop, since they like to keep these components protected, and that is a good thing just in case if you do drop your laptop. You're also going to be able to see your RAM. So if you do need to upgrade your RAM to 16 gigabytes, then you can definitely get DDR3 RAM, but just make sure not to get DDR4, since that won't be compatible. So there might be a center screw, and you also going to have to look around, since there's some screws you actually don't notice, and you need to be careful of those and make sure you don't pull any components out or break a component by pulling it, even though there's a screw still installed. And that can actually be a little tricky, since some of them are kind of hidden, but you should be able to get all of the screws out, and that should actually really be good. And then there's also sometimes you have to like kind of slide the thing or something like that, or move it out, just because they do keep it extremely secure. So if you do drop your laptop, the CPU doesn't come flying out or something like that. Since on some of these older laptops, they actually do have CPUs that can be taken out, which is actually really nice. I wish they still did that so you could upgrade your CPU eventually, but nowadays the CPU is usually soldered in, and so is the GPU, so that's a little bit of a bummer, but that's okay. So now you should be able to see the components, and the first thing I recommend doing is actually taking out the fan or whatever is holding the heatsink down for the CPU. As you can see, there is the CPU there, and that is connected with 4 screws. So you're going to want to be careful with that, and then just take the phone out. Make sure not to bend any wires, or else you might have to buy a new fan. And things are a little bit dusty. I did repaste the CPU a little bit ago just to test it out and see how this computer was oriented. And so I did clean the fan, but when I did take it out, the fan was extremely dusty, and the CPU did not have a ton of thermal paste on it. So just clean everything, and as you can see, there's a little bit too much thermal paste on there. So you do want to be a little bit careful. And now you can see the components. That is actually the heatsink. So you're going to need to clean the thermal paste off of both of those things, because those things are what connects the heatsink to the CPU. So you're going to need some alcohol, and then you're also are going to need a microfiber cloth, and then some thermal paste. So I definitely recommend using MX4. It's just a really great thermal paste. So now just wipe the CPU and make sure to get it all off without touching too many components till it's really nice and shiny and looks like it's new. You will probably be able to tell when the thermal paste is off. So just give it a good rubbing. Do be a little bit careful just not to hurt any of the components. And it should look pretty much like that when it's done. It should be really shiny. It's okay if you leave a tiny bit on some places, but you do want to get most of it off. So then you're also going to want to wipe it off of the heatsink, and that's another big thing you cannot forget, or else it's going to still not have very good performance, and it could actually really damage the performance of the laptop. So now when you're done with that, you're just going to want to apply a little bit of new thermal paste, just a tiny bit, since too much will act more of a heater in insulation than actually thermal paste, and too little will not get enough heat through. So you do want to just kind of get it the size of a small pea, and then just put that on right there. It should look pretty much like that for a CPU about that size. Then just put it on, and make sure not to lift up the heat sink before you put after you put the thermal paste on, or else it could cause air bubbles, and that does decrease performance. So if you do want maximum performance, don't pull it back up. Just squish it down, and you're going to have to trust that you put enough thermal paste on, and make sure that you didn't put too much on. So now screw it on pretty tight, not extremely tight, but do definitely make sure that it is connected securely to the CPU. Then you can put the fan back in, and that should, of course, you need to put that in. Just put that in securely too. You're going to definitely have to plug that wire back in just to make sure that it does turn on. So make sure you plugged all the wires back in that you took out. And then just put the screws back in and screw those in pretty well. You want the fan to be pretty secure. All the components in your laptop should be screwed in fairly secure, just so if you do drop your laptop or it gets knocked around a lot in your backpack or something, that the components don't come undone. And especially if the fan's cord gets pulled, then you're going to get terrible thermals. You're going to have to reopen your laptop. So now just put that little metal piece back on. And of course, check to make sure all of your screws are in on the inside and secured pretty tightly. Then all you need to do is put the screws back in on the metal platform. Make sure you get all of them. It's okay if you do lose one screw in the process, but it is better if you can keep all of them. And that's pretty much all. That's how you repaste a CPU, and that should give you a lot better performance. It's about 5 to 10 degrees Celsius colder, so mattering on what thermal paste you use, that can really help. So overall, this should definitely increase performance on your laptop or desktop. It takes a ton of load off of the CPU, GPU, and even the RAM. So if you do have an old laptop or desktop, this should definitely increase your performance. So I really hope this has helped you gain back some of that performance you used to have. And as operating systems like Windows have gotten a lot heavier, it is nice to not have to upgrade your laptop just because operating systems and applications are taking advantage of people upgrading to newer computers. I would really love to hear if any of these methods worked for you, and if you're going to be able to keep your old laptop or desktop, or if you're going to buy a new one. If you would put that in the comment section down below, that would be awesome. Thanks for watching. If you want to get a first look at my new videos, please subscribe. Anyway, catch you later. Cut.